For all my overthinkers, let me pose a scenario for you. It's your birthday, and you're excited to browse your favorite game store that you frequent. Thanks to the gift card that your loved ones have gotten for you, you have free reign over any game you want to buy. Within reason, of course, not if you're buying Train Simulator and all its DLCs. When searching for the perfect game, what are the things that you consider? Some of you might say that it's a good story, so you might consider picking up something like Metaphor. You might want a myriad of content available that allows for freedom of choice, which points towards open world games like Red Dead Redemption. I know some people whose answer would be where it lands on the scale of the Replayability Index. Games that are live service are perfect examples of this. You drop into a competitive shooter and battle it out with other players in a test of aim and game sense. Friends of mine will boot up Street Fighter 6 on their day off of work and grind a ranked ladder, truly testing their mentality in a one-on-one competitive environment. Different live service games fill different niches, and whatever you're looking for is probably out there in some way, shape, or form. This is the first archetype of game I think of when replayability is in consideration. Something I don't think a lot of people consider though is the expanse of replayability that exists in the gaming space. Roguelikes are a genre perfectly designed for this, with satisfying mechanics in order to foster a seamless gameplay loop. New iterations have broken out in this field, and one of them was considered for Game of the Year this past December. There's also a whole shelf of games that have replayability built into its narrative, and a story well constructed enough that it begs the player to seek the answers they need by experiencing the same progression of story, but exploring the different paths that are available. I want to talk about how replayability, while not being something we always have our minds on, is a vital aspect of games that make these series appealing and keep bringing us back after so many instances of obsessive addiction. Seriously, I need help badly. Let me just get it out there. Balatro might be a traditional masterclass in the field of replayability. Its gameplay uses something that we're all familiar with, the timeless concept of playing card games. However, the method through which they present it upends your world entirely. It's like when I first learned about Buc-ee's and was thinking, oh yeah, that looks like a pretty fun place. And you're saying the largest one out there could fit 100 Los Angeles apartments in it? Alright, I just don't know what to believe anymore. Moving past land ownership crimes, every aspect of Balatro is tailored to be as addicting as possible. This might be the craziest part of the game to start a rant on, but the music puts you in the trance. The soundtrack allows for a certain flow state where it's consistent through the whole play session, but is constantly evolving to keep a freshness through the lifetime of your experience with it. There's a really good video by Relax Alex on the use of adaptive music in Balatro, which is something I've never heard of before, but that you've probably tussled with yourself. He explains it in really neat terms and with an extreme passion, so I'll leave it in the description if you want a more detailed explanation of it. I'll tell it to you though in a way that a white man would describe a Guatemalan hot dog to his ignorant family. You may have heard adaptive music in games like Banjo Kazooie. Its cartoonish silliness is accompanied by guitar and banjo, as well as woodwinds like bassoon and flute. Other instances of this concept can be heard in Journey, where its heavy and wondrous story and atmosphere is accompanied this time by a combination of traditional and glass strings with some piano. I may have said something incorrect in these sentences, but remember, I'm a guy who listens to the beeps and boops of music. I'm all about vibes and not a sophisticated fellow who finds merit in listening to respectable music, whatever that means. What I'm saying is that Balatro uses this adaptive music to fit different themes of sound into its OST. Whether you're in the shop or battling a boss, the soundtrack fits the bill when it needs you to feel like you're being sucked into the vacuum of space, or you're using those 2 little brain cells you have to figure out how you're going to play a high scoring hand with just a high card. It immerses you beyond what a regular game can do. There's 2 ways we can go from here, but let's just dive into build potential. I just made fun of high card for being a puny hand, when in reality, it is one of the most reliable strategies you can muster given the correct resources. The composition of glass cards with red seals and steel cards with blue seals gives so much opportunity for high card to go absolutely berserk. These different alterations of the playing cards give you so much space for creativity. The jokers add another layer of depth with abilities that re-trigger cards, or add additional multipliers should it be a face card, or added chips if it's a 2. There's too many choices when it comes to high card builds. Another method of playing, which I make fun of, is the flush merchant. It is the easiest build to get into and play, which is why I dub it the I want to play this game on my second monitor while I watch House MD playstyle. With jokers that add multipliers, chips, or give you money upon playing a certain suit, there has never been an easier build to play in a roguelike. Tarot cards allow you to alter cards which lead to wild cards, allowing the chosen one to apply to every suit available. If you truly want to turn this into a gambler's game, in spectral packs, you can change an entire hand of 8 cards to a single suit at random. Now's your chance to spin the slot machine without giving up real-life green dollars. This is just the tip of the iceberg. From jokers with basic to situational viability and planet cards that give a flat bonus to certain hands, there's a clear and solid foundation for these simple principles to work. They are built in such a way to mesh down an unimaginable amount of avenues. No single run will ever be the same, and with so many options, why would you want it to be? It's addicting to such a point that if you really were going to go off the deep end, why would you just stick to weed and cigarettes? Might as well throw in some black if you're going balls to the wall. Regardless, the replay value of Balatro is well past what other games can manage. That is the beauty of roguelikes. Balatro has taken the potential of what they can be and taken it to new limits. With limitless possibilities, what more could you want from a game that is seemingly perfect in almost every way? And that's where I whiplash you so hard that you time travel back to Rome into a buffoon's lineage. Sometimes it can get a bit overwhelming. When it comes to simple game mechanics with no story, you sort of have to make an objective for yourself. Whether it's min-maxing a run to achieve the highest score or completing all the stakes on every deck, I usually like to have some goal to aim towards. I've always been result-oriented, so when you're not that deep into achieving any part of your objective, the goal line can be daunting as it looms over you every second of your playtime. Of course, most people are normal. I feel like I'm in the minority in this camp. So for those who understand, thank you. But for everyone else, let me explain to you the very dummy stupid side of my brain that manipulates my playstyle. We'll start with the difficulties, the different stakes that are available to give layers of difficulty as you progress through the game. The different stakes impose alterations to your run. It may take away a discard, cause jokers to be unsellable, or cause the score for preceding antes and their individual blinds to exponentially increase. Up to the gold stake, the difficulties pile on top of each other, and I barely had enough in the tank to finish that challenge on the plasma deck, which in my opinion is one of the most powerful decks in Balatro. When I looked out to the sea of other decks I had to complete, I practically fell over from thinking about the exhaustion of finishing them. These different decks provide insane levels of layers to the game, but there are some that are plain annoying to play. You always need to conform to a certain playstyle, such as with the black deck, but it's pretty fun from there on. This is just a nitpick, but again, I may just be a bit silly with my opinions. There isn't much to be upset about here, but in general, I believe Balatro just isn't my idea of the completely perfect game. There's a reason why it was nominated for Game of the Year, but there's an aspect missing from the stimulation coming in that only allows me to rate this game a 4.5 out of 5. For me, replayability needs to entice me in the form of attachment. Even with seamless gameplay loops, that isn't enough to keep me wanting to come back, but again, it is different for everybody. Let me talk a little bit more about my perfect version of replayability and just how strange it can get between different people. So what about a game that bases its whole story on the basis of replayability? Well, then you'd have a game like Nier Automata. It follows the story of 2B and 9S, two androids stopping a crisis from taking place. Them and their android comrades in this android army are battling a new threat that arises within discrepancies happening in the machines who they are warring against. You play through the game from 2B's perspective and get to experience the war to end all wars between the good guys and machines who may be sentient. Throughout this whole game, you are exploring the facets of what makes people really human. Between the people who are left in the resistance camp and the machines who seem to have selfish desires of their own, it's up to 2B and you as the player to discern whether these monsters of destruction deserve empathy and mercy. There may be the tools of war in their ranks, but there are also peaceful villages where they make do with what they have. You meet the anomalies that make up the machine army. In between conflicts, you talk to your operators who send you new information but are also their own people, sporting their own personality and charismatic qualities. All of this is in service of your human overlords who are constantly reminding you of the war that persists between them and the machines that overtook their world. Playing through the game was an emotional trip. I felt backed up tears trying to gush out as I watched the chaos that unfolded towards the end of the game. What was seemingly slow and methodical investigation turned into a storm of skirmishes happening all around me. The final conflict took place, and in the longest fight I've ever battled, the arduous story of Nier had been completed. It leaves you with a certain satisfaction. You see that 2B and 9S were still able to be together in the end, despite the many threats and dangers they faced along the way. In the game about belonging, this is also a love story. It sucks that some people don't see it that way, but Yoko Taro and many others recognize that multifaceted stories like Nier are alluding towards our lives and wants to take any meaning we find in these games into our own stories. But it doesn't end there. After the credits finished, it said there is still more to be played. If I continued off from the same save file, I would experience the same story again, but from a different perspective. So I booted up the game again and was now living through the eyes and memories of 9S. Telling the same story is a bold move to do for a game, especially such a story-driven one, where someone may not want to sit through similar cutscenes or story beats. However, Nier took it into their own hands to entice the audience well enough to keep them drawn in. The first scene you see in ending B of Nier is a little machine mourning the death of his brother. In a panicked manner, this little machine attempts to find anything so that he can resuscitate his sibling. What he finds is oil leaking from a pipe. He takes a bucket and fills it up. Maybe this substance will revive his dead family member. After the longest sequence of walking that this game has to offer so far, this machine is able to get back to his brother. But after pouring the oil over him, there's no response back. Zoom out from this crushing scenario, and 9S is watching this unfold. Of course, 9S and these androids are painfully unaware of the faint humanity that exists in these machines. However, throughout 9S's playthrough, you experience some of the visions that he takes up as part of his function as a recon android. Hacking into the systems of these enemies, he's able to see the history that brought these machines to the point they're at. From the ballerina diva in the amusement park to the kingdom in the forest, these machines have a long story behind the mission they have undertaken. There are so many moments like these that it'd be a crime for me to spoil the specifics if you haven't seen it for yourself. It presents the story in such an insightful way compared to the first playthrough, using the new dynamic 9S has with the world. It is realistically portrayed through the gameplay as well, with the new hacking minigame ever present as one of your attacks, and is viable as even when you're underpowered, the damage from hacking presents an efficient and fresh way to deal damage. You go through the motions, and yet again, you are presented with the ending of the game. This time, it is through the eyes of 9S, and he has his own monologue to close out this chapter. It is as heartfelt as the ending with 2B. Though, with the new avenues of the plot now open to you, it can't be helped that you don't feel as satisfied. It's almost as if they took the phrase "ignorance is bliss" and encapsulated it as one of the many themes in this beautiful story. I won't say much more about the story than that. There are more playthroughs for the player to experience after this one, and they ask even more from the audience when it comes to empathy and emotional availability. But just like Balatro, where the story is not its strong suit, there are some flaws within Nier's gameplay loop. During the duration of the first two endings, it was not made clear to me how important levels were going to be. It felt like I was strong enough to take on whatever came my way, despite me being underleveled at times. Then, all of a sudden, the level spiked, therefore steepening the cliffside of difficulty that I was facing. During the first two endings, the mechanics of the bosses were already complex enough to portray the desperation 2B and 9S might have actually felt during those fights. This artificial jump was just abrasive and annoying. Nier might have set a new milestone for me, stealing this game as the most forceful leveling system I've ever had tossed onto me. Of course, this doesn't take away from the already gut-wrenching story that I've been told. I feel so compelled to hear the rest of it that I am going to be restarting the game on a new save, making sure to take into account the leveling in this playthrough. It doesn't take away, but it leaves me unable to rate this game the proper score it would have gotten if the game systems had not been ridiculously needy. When I think about replayability in video games, there is a logical answer that lies within the speculation. Balatro is what my mind should point towards immediately, with roguelike mechanics that, and I've already said it, glue my eyes to my screen, scanning with my focus and peripherals to make the most out of the run that I have going on. While it sticks to simple features, there's piling depth that proves even challenging to the smartest of players. I didn't talk too much about the aspects of live service games in the beginning, so let's talk a little bit about it now. These titles are meant to last even past their expected expiration dates. It is the perfect monetary positive product, with purchasable progression systems for cosmetics paired with a store that has egregious prices for premium accessories. It's pretty obvious why these game studios want their projects like Call of Duty, Marvel Rivals, and League of Legends to last a lifetime and some more. But do these games warrant a lifetime of hours to be poured into them? Call of Duty, despite whatever they may try, will always remain an arcade shooter-esque project. There's nowhere significant to go in terms of competitiveness, and from what I understand of the balancing, playing in the casual manner can be frustrating when you have a maniac children staying home from school, playing 8 hours a day when you're just a plumber who got home from a 12-hour shift and want just 1 hour of entertainment. Marvel Rivals is better in this sense, and their character release schedule for each season will prove quicker than any other live service game right now. It has dragged so many people into the genre of hero shooters with the basis of Marvel, but the community has suffered due to this. Toxicity is a problem in this game, along with some balancing issues when it comes to some of the characters. After all, with so many factors to take into consideration, how can you extinguish all the fires that pop up? If you're fine with those facets of the game, then you're free to go ahead and play it. In terms of League of Legends, this is a game that has proven it can stand the test of time, taking heavy, and I mean heavy, inspiration from Dota 2. League of Legends made MOBAs accessible to many other people who had never known the genre. Throughout the years, however, the barrier of entry becomes more volatile with so many characters and item balancing issues. Not to mention, Riot, as a corporation, is very greedy. They don't tend to listen to the community all the time, and while that can be understood for pieces of art such as their show, Arcane, live service games are in direct service to the player base. If you're not pleasing your audience with your game changes, then who are you making the game for at all? It can be confusing when they make unpopular decisions for the greater good. These genres of game should be the end of the conversation when we talk about what games have the best replayability, but with their gameplay loops that prove addicting to climb and compete in. When you ask this question to different people though, many of them will give different answers. Some people may not be looking for replayability at all when they're thinking of their personal best games. The time sink in theory should foster an affection for the product, but there may be something else at play if we're talking about how weird replayability in games is. In my case, for the best games in replayability, Balatro has the systems, but not the attachment driving my emotional side. Nier has the story to keep me hooked, but the systems dull the experience. Is there a game that balances both perfectly and even meshes the two in a compatible sense? I've talked about this game before, and I'll talk about it again. I present to you Slay the Princess. It feels like a cop-out to include a visual novel in a video about systems that drag you in with its replayability, but please let me explain a little bit. Slay the Princess has the story that you need. One about love, belonging, and growing up wrapped up in an existential package that feels like Pandora's box when you open it up. It surrounds you in a rush and warrants just 5 more minutes of gameplay every time you think you're about to let up. This is achieved through its genius idea of playable routes. If you're familiar with visual novels, you aren't a stranger to the several routes that may be available to you in a game like this. What Black Tabby Games, the studio who made this, have done is switch up some of the usuals to present routes that ultimately, always, give you another inch of this mile-long narrative. There are too many avenues to explore that, even after the limited amount of actual endings, the mystified nature of this world and its characters will want you to keep playing. It may seem ridiculous to say that it's the cream of the crop when it comes to replayability, especially with so many open world games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and the infinite methods of gameplay available to you through builds in Fallout New Vegas. But hear me out, I'll tell you a little bit about this world and my experience with it. I'll be spoiling the endings to these routes of Slay the Princess, and there'll be chapters to dictate where I start and stop talking about them. But if you're fine with that, let's continue this conversation. The route that started it all was the Razor route. Running through this route, and I mean running, with the psychotic stuff that happens in this one, I was swept off my feet by the information overload that was coming towards me. It wasn't exposition though. Through experience and being thrown to the wolves, I understood that there were alternate voices representing different primal emotions that we all have, and other fantastical phenomena that I didn't know would happen. To get straight to the point, it was the perfect introduction to the game. Forcing me through the most amount of timeline resets in any route, I understood the kind of predicament it was to attempt to slay the princess. It may have influenced me to try to save the princess during my subsequent routes. Through desperate situations and intense fight scenes, I could feel the despair that rushed through my character and taste the bloodlust that was starving within the princess. With relentless bloodshed rampant through every frame of the route, it felt as if I was being tested. Was I going to be able to handle the cruelties that this game would inflict upon me? From everything I heard about this game, it was horror in an existential sense, but I was also having my eyes held open to witness gore and other brutalities pierce through my torso and limbs. To say nothing more, it was a trial for what was to come. This was the perfect way to get me hooked on this game. It told me of mechanics that held importance in the story that was yet to be told, and guidelines that would influence my choices on how I would go about either rescuing or slaying the princess. I was so engrossed at this point that I dove deep into every route, even after finishing one of the main endings. It drew me into replaying the game without any insistent notification. One of the craziest things about this progression through different routes, though, is that even after completing the ending of the game, I was still unaware of many unique facets that belong to this world. Whether you're speaking directly about what occurs at the end of the game leading up to it, or characterization of the different personalities of the princess, going down the different routes always leads to eye-opening revelations that claw you back into the rabbit hole. These realizations are what keeps bringing you back and enhances that replayability factor. The next route, dubbed the Wilds, takes place when you and the princess merge into one entity. After betraying her and the cabin consuming you in the fit of the princess's rage, you and her are now serving as one object. What's more is that you are the earth and everything surrounding it. The woods was once its own object, but now that you've meshed with the princess, it was as if the joint powers of you both caused this phenomenon to take place. The princess talks to you in a much more intimate manner. She sounds closer. You can hear every sound that her mouth makes as she breathes and clicks her tongue. This detail in sound really imitates the fact that you two are not speaking from across the room, but next to one another's ears. In turn, this garners a type of trust you've never had before. If both of you, as she is saying, are really victims in all of this, then the only one to blame is the narrator, the one who is still forcefully trying to keep us at each other's throats even when we're completely whole now. This route functions to reveal the trickeries that the narrator has been keeping from you. In becoming the earth that you once walked on, your being is able to penetrate the simulation that you've been a part of. It isn't a regular occurrence that only you and the princess are the ones that jump through the time loops, but not the narrator. From interrogating him, it also seems like he hides something from you, but perhaps it is still within reach. As you grow your roots and spread your influence across the vast reaches of this void, you consume the surroundings around you to expand your reach. The princess is holding the strands of everything together as you diverge into the dwellings that exist in this nature. Eventually, you spot a slab of stone that seems suspiciously placed compared to the other places that you've searched. While the narrator pleads and begs you to stop what you are doing, the princess and yourself take it in strides to break through the entrapment you're in. Through this hole in the wall, you are able to spot what seems to be blades of grass with dewdrops at the point of them. A glowing yellow aura surrounds this environment. It seems to be a pocket of life, or perhaps an expanse that surrounds the pocket that you are confined to. Either way, there is something there that beseeches your curiosity, but before you can attempt anything, the long quiet consumes everything, including the princess. The Wilds route is alluding to something that exists within this universe of a game. At this point, I had not seen the ultimate result of this path. It was only during a later time in my playthrough that I gained clarity on everything. But the fact that they would hint towards such a grand reveal at the end of the game really proves the game's intention to keep you reeled in, even if you try to pull yourself away. You're on the hook, but at some point, you have to realize that you may be letting yourself be pulled in due to the fundamental enjoyment that this game's infinite replayability provides. With sneak peeks of what's to come, it incites a curiosity in you that cannot be sated through mere speculation. You want answers, and while the game does not directly give you what you want, the narrative provides enough explanation to allow for theorizing. Without any complete interpretation yet, you're driven to play more and more, in an infinite loop of going through different routes to explore the vast expanse that this story covers. There's a final route I want to talk about, and that is the moment of clarity. Just like the Razor, this one is mind-boggling. It takes you through the deepest caverns of this story and exposes you to the stirring horror that exists within the facets of its narrative. Before you reach this moment of clarity, you give in to the nightmare, a version of the princess that preys on your weaknesses and indecision to decide anything. She takes off her mask, and in a flurry of visions, you are shown the many routes that the princess has experienced within this time loop. Unless this is your first route you happened upon, you know about the nature of this time loop and the inhumanities that it drags out of yourself and the princess. Just like you, she experiences it all the same. Whether it's painful death or eroding out of existence, loneliness, sadness, and anger encapsulates the energy that these routes bring her. All she wants is to leave. She doesn't want to live through these tiring moments that drive her to the brink of insanity. As far as you know, both you and herself are victims to this predicament, but during this route, you have chosen to take no side in the situation. She calls you a coward, rightfully so, because you can't even decide if you'll save her, let her use you to escape, slay her, or allow her to slay you to continue forward. You're choosing the worst possible choice, the choice of keeping her trapped and stagnant. You arrive at the next part of the route. The title card hints towards what happens next. Just as in the Razor route, all the primal instincts you could possibly feel are present, but there is something holding them back from their usual selves. They are traumatized. Though you may not have felt it, every one of them lived through those flickering moments that were shown in your hallucinations, and they cannot unsee what they have done. Rather than being a victim of bloodshed, you are a victim of psychological damage. You have become a prisoner to your past, as your conscience doesn't even allow you to choose any other option than to help the princess escape. She yearns for freedom, and the guilt that you feel won't allow you to backstab her or cause her to suffer anymore. But all the same, the long quiet consumes everything, and you end up right back where you started. This route showed me another expanse of possibilities that the Razor couldn't have possibly shown with how fast-paced and brutal it was. While that route was very upfront and blunt, the moment of clarity only works if you let yourself understand the horrors that the princess has gone through. It's the same as you, and whether or not the game forced you into canonically freeing her, I believe many players would have chosen to let her live the life she has been striving for. There's nothing more tragic than being a prisoner of fate. Whether it's realizations or a display of the horrors that we have yet to see, Slay the Princess entices you to keep on playing its game. It shows you things you may know about or that might intrigue you. This makes you want to keep playing. It alludes to mechanics that affect both you and your partner, whether it's in love or war, and uses these to influence the choices you make for your own benefit or for this princess, who you grow to care about more and more. I enjoy this game because it makes me ruminate and ponder concepts of existence that we rarely think of in our daily lives. Even if you're not the type of person to be into horror, this game does a lot more than just scares and frights. You become interested due to morbid curiosity, but stay and keep coming back due to the traps of replayability that this game snares you with. It's no surprise that this game has such a dedicated fan base. Nonetheless, I've done a lot of talking, but what conclusion did we really come to? Is Balatro really the perfect roguelike because of its masterful mechanics? It wasn't for me due to my lack of attachment to it. Was Nier Automata any better? It had the story, but repulsed me with its gameplay systems. Then why did Slay the Princess drag me in and keep me coming back no matter what? Sure, it has the perfect story, but were the faint mechanics really enough to keep me hooked? My answer is, I think it's just preference. You should just play and replay the games that you love. Everyone can say that live service games have perfect replayability because the mechanics and systems are meant to be played infinitely. Roguelikes are a masterclass in this, as it gives you steady progression across runs, but never lets you play on one for too long. Unless of course you're some sort of god gamer, but that's besides the point. Games that you love will always have perfect replayability. Whether it's something nostalgic from your childhood or a masterful story-driven game that brings you to tears every time you finish it, we can play these games for years on end and never get tired of them. I told you replayability in games is weird, but it is that way because everyone's perfect game for replayability will be different. Perhaps you'll find someone with the same select series, but it'll be for different reasons, whether you love it for the characters, setting, gameplay loop, or something else. I just wanted to make this video to talk about some of my favorite recent games that I keep coming back to. I really like Balatro, but a story-enriched game like Slay the Princess will always be number one in replayability for me. These games always bring me back, and I think it's just in our best interest as people who love games to just play the games we love. Life is too short to spend time on things we don't actually like. Don't let any critique from a journalist or your friends deter you from what you like. Some experiences are meant to be special, tailored just for you. Let that feeling drive you to keep playing what you love. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you want to support me more, I opened up memberships where for $2, you can gain access to exclusive videos like where I overanalyze the blue box ending, or early access to trailers for my video, like the title card sequence to this one. If you would check it out, I would appreciate it forever. I know this video was a bit different as I'm not deeply analyzing a thematic topic, but I felt passionate about this as I'm currently playing Balatro while writing this outro. Either way, it was fun, and I have a very emotional video coming out next. Stay tuned if you're excited. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you all later, you cool people.